For in the morning, Chicago hums like a machine trying not to wake a sleeping city. Radiators tick. A bus size 2 blocks away. In a small West Side apartment, pencil lines on a page mark a bed, a doorway, a narrow hall. The lines look harmless until you notice where the arrows point. The map is a promise, or a threat. Fred Hampton sleeps, his breath even, a future halfway between dream and design. Down the hall, comrades doze, shoes by the door, jackets folded on chairs, papers stacked where the night left them. No one hears the building exhale. No one hears the city turn its face. A key, a whisper, then with splinters like old bones. Shouts, boots, a single cracking sound that turns breath into questions. How did they know where to go first? Who put pen to paper and drew the bedroom as if they'd stood inside the dark and measured it with their heart? Why would a government reduce a community program to targets and angles? Tonight, we follow the file that walked on 2 legs, the plan that traveled in a pocket, and the investigation that hid behind a word built to sound reasonable. Infiltration. This is the story of how an idea became an operation, how an operation became a night, and how a night became a wound that still hasn't closed. But what investigators found next would change everything. Oakland, 1966. The talk is of dignity and defense, but the work begins with hunger. Before the speeches and the slogans, volunteers crack eggs in church basements and school kitchens. Free breakfast for children. A metal pan hisses, a kid laughs, a mother exhales. It's ordinary and revolutionary at the same time. Listen to the morning. Mugs against tables, soft chatter, the clatter of spoons. Picture a child who didn't eat last night chewing slowly and studying the faces across the room. Faces that look like theirs and faces that don't, all of them saying, "You matter. Sit." Communities feel it in their bones. Someone showed up. Someone kept a promise. But the uniforms, black leather jackets, berets, pull cameras like magnets. The Panthers patrol with law books and courage, watching the watchers, documenting the stops that never make the evening news. Between pancakes and patrols sits a tension you can taste. Service as shield, dignity as demand. Neighbors see the breakfasts. Police see the rifles and the posture. Which view will write the headline? Which story will the government listen to when it decides what kind of threat this is? A whisper slides through the rooms where policy is written. Find out who they are, how they move, where they sleep. The word infiltrate is said softly, as if the softness makes it harmless. But even whispered words leave echoes. So the question begins to form, slow and tight as a fist. If you can't defeat what a community builds in daylight, what do you do with it at dawn? But what investigators found next would change everything. Washington, late 1950s into the 1960s. In a building where the carpets hush footsteps and the doors remember every hand that turned them, a program grows that doesn't need a name people would recognize. It gets one anyway. A bureaucratic blend of syllables that could mean anything: counterintelligence, COINTELPRO. Letters slide across desks. Disrupt, discredit, divide. Don't shout, whisper. Don't arrest if you can ruin. Don't argue if you can make them argue with one another. Anonymous notes sent to the right-wrong person. Employers nudged. Landlords pressured. Photographs collected. Informants recruited. If solidarity is their shield, crack it from the inside. Imagine you're young and angry at injustice and you join a chapter because you want to feed kids or keep the night honest. Now imagine someone shakes your hand, calls you brother, and reports every word you say to a file that learns your heartbeat. The program doesn't need to knock down a door if it can move a chair an inch to the left and make you trip in front of your friends. A new set of memos mention a name that keeps showing up in daily reports: the Black Panther Party. The pages don't photograph breakfast lines or clinic waiting rooms. They circle leaders in red pencil, underline meeting times, and ask for maps. Always maps. And if a city is a body, intelligence wants the arteries. Who delivers, who protects, who plans. Because if you know the arteries, you don't need to crush the chest. You just pinch the right vein and wait. Which is more dangerous to a system that prefers quiet, armed patrols that quote the law, or teenagers who believe their morning meal is a human right. which is easier to target. He is easy to like. He holds the car door, he laughs at the right beat, he remembers everyone's nickname. He drives comrades to meetings, moves chairs before anyone asks, and looks a little overwhelmed in photographs, as if he still can't believe the backstage has opened to him. William, young, polite, observant. He keeps a small notebook because details matter. He knows who's late, who's angry, who's in love, who's exhausted. He knows the safest way to the safe house. He knows the coffee order of a man who might change a city. To a chapter, he is useful. To the bureau, he is oxygen. Where does the chairman sleep? A voice asks in a room with blinds drawn. William doesn't flinch. Front bedroom, north wall, bed against the window. His answers slide into forms that slide into folders that slide into drawers that no longer feel like furniture. They feel like levers. Picture a diner booth at 1 a.m. The waitress tops off a cup and pretends not to listen. He hands over a scrap. A quick sketch of a hallway, a rectangle for a bed, a tiny note for a closet. An apartment turned blueprint turned weapon. But a blueprint alone doesn't break a door. People do. And people make choices. What do you call a choice made in the night, paid in cash, tucked into a pocket? What do you call the pressure that makes that choice feel inevitable? In the apartment, someone tapes a child's drawing to the fridge. In an office, someone uses a ruler on a map and writes, primary target. And somewhere between kindness and caution, trust makes its last, quiet mistake. December 4th, 1969. Pre-dawn is the most honest hour. There are no performances at 4:30 a.m. The stairwell smells like paint and old dust. The hall stores echoes like a church. A battering sound turns drywall into weather. The first shout is a shape more than a word. The second shout is unmistakable. 2 shots, then many. A young man falls in the front room. A coffee cup clipped off the edge of a table and shattering like punctuation. In the bedroom, someone reaches out in the direction of a voice they love and finds only air. A neighbor presses their back to a wall and prays no stray bullet will learn their name. Later, there will be diagrams and rulers and contested angles. Later, words like ballistics and trajectory will stand where people once stood. But right now, it's simpler and heavier. A brilliant 21-year-old with a gift for making strangers into allies doesn't wake up. The future goes quiet in a room that will take years to stop echoing. Outside, the city's breath fogs in the air of those who stayed up all night. Inside, the apartment has become a puzzle they will try to solve in courtrooms and columns, at kitchen tables and in lectures. Who fired first? How many bullets went one way and how many the other? Why did they know exactly where to go? Grief organizes itself into a march. Anger tries on a suit and a tie and walks into a press conference. In houses across the city, parents bend to their children and explain that sometimes the people meant to protect you don't know your name at all. At a doorway, a young woman holds herself together with both hands and says, "He had plans," as if saying it could keep them alive a little longer. If you're still here, subscribe, because stories like this deserve more eyes and more voices. Across the country, a small group of citizens in a quiet Pennsylvania town do something that sounds like fiction. They open a locked office and leave with boxes that feel heavier than paper should. In living rooms and dorm rooms, they spread out the contents like a crime scene. Memos, routing slips, typed directives, carbon copies smudged with history. They mail the proof to newsrooms that have learned to choose caution, to editors who've heard whispers but needed ink. The first headline lands like a door swinging open into bright noon. A program built to infiltrate and disrupt domestic groups, broad enough to make the word subversive mean whatever the memo needs it to mean. People who never went to a meeting suddenly understand why their mail was late, why the landlord changed his mind, why a job offer vanished. Those who fed children at dawn hear the language used to define them, words that make a neighbor into a suspect, a school into a front, a breakfast into a plot. The distance between a church basement and a locked cabinet shrinks to the width of a page. Families read and feel a hot, old fear cool into clarity. It wasn't just us. It was a plan. Dialogue flickers in kitchens. They had a file on you? They had a file on all of us. And in a building with very clean floors, A supervisor reaches for a phrase that fits the moment and lands on one that's been used before. Excesses. The word is a bandage on a deep cut. It sticks for a moment, then peels under the drip of truth. But even a headline can't hold what's inside these boxes. The way a suggestion can yank two friends apart. The way a rumor can put a crosshair on a door. The way a blueprint can travel folded in a coat pocket and unfold in a room that will never feel safe again. Why does a democracy build secret rooms where it forgets its own rules? What happens when the lock breaks and light floods in? Across the country, a small group of citizens in a quiet Pennsylvania town do something that sounds like fiction. They open a locked office and leave with boxes that feel heavier than paper should. In living rooms and dorm rooms, they spread out the contents like a crime scene. Memos, routing slips, typed directives, carbon copies smudged with history. They mail the proof to newsrooms that have learned to choose caution, to editors who've heard whispers but needed ink. The first headline lands like a door swinging open into bright noon. A program built to infiltrate and disrupt domestic groups, broad enough to make the word subversive mean whatever the memo needs it to mean. People who never went to a meeting suddenly understand why their mail was late, why the landlord changed his mind, why a job offer vanished. Those who fed children at dawn hear the language used to define them, words that make a neighbor into a suspect, a school into a front, a breakfast into a plot. The distance between a church basement and a locked cabinet shrinks to the width of a page. Families read and feel a hot, old fear cool into clarity. It wasn't just us. It was a plan. Dialogue flickers in kitchens. They had a file on you? They had a file on all of us. And in a building with very clean floors, a supervisor reaches for a phrase that fits the moment and lands on one that's been used before. Excesses. The word is a bandage on a deep cut. It sticks for a moment, then peels under the drip of truth. But even a headline can't hold what's inside these boxes. The way a suggestion can yank two friends apart. The way a rumor can put a crosshair on a door. The way a blueprint can travel folded in a coat pocket and unfold in a room that will never feel safe again. Why does a democracy build secret rooms where it forgets its own rules? What happens when the lock breaks and light floods in? A camera points at a face that knows too much about shadows. The man speaks in a voice that can't quite decide whether it's justifying or confessing. He describes rooms the audience has never seen, cars idling at intersections where the air remembers what happened, looks exchanged in hallways, the arithmetic of betrayal. One piece of information traded for one more day outside a cell. He talks about a leader's charisma like a weather report. Not whether it exists, everyone knows that, but how it moves through a room, how it changes the temperature, how people stand up straighter when it passes by. He talks about a floor plan as if it were a receipt, necessary, mundane. He winces when certain names come up. He insists on other points. He is precise where precision helps him, vague where vagueness protects him. There's a line in his account where the ground drops away. It arrives without warning. The night of the raid, the moments before, the question of what anyone swallowed and what anyone knew. He says one thing, other voices say another. The camera doesn't choose a side. It records the tremor in his hands. What do you call a life built across fault lines? Can a man live with two histories? One he tells and one that tells him, without breaking? Outside the studio, the city goes on. Children eat breakfast served by people who remember a different kind of morning. A street corner where a speech once lifted the air now hosts a bus stop where headphones drown out the past. The world moves, but the questions don't. And in homes where trust became an endangered species, some people set out chairs anyway, brew coffee anyway, open the door anyway. Because the opposite of infiltration is community, and community only exists if someone shows up early and flips on the lights. Years pass. Documents are digitized. A museum placard tells a story a grandmother once told at the edge of a bed while a child faded into sleep. A new generation discovers the word COINTELPRO and scrolls until the edges of their phone feel warm. They ask, how much is true? And how much is still happening? A retired agent sits in a quiet kitchen and says, it was a different time. As if time alone can carry the weight. An elder who wore a beret in photographs brushes a hand across the edge of a frame and says nothing for a long time. Silence has its own grammar. What happens to a nation that learns its own government turned the art of community into the science of suspicion? Maybe it learned something important about oversight, about law, about how power should be fenced. Maybe it learned something else about how easily fear can become policy and how long it takes to apologize in ways that matter. In a school auditorium, a teenager gives a report on a man who never made it to 22, and the room claps because the story was good. After, the teacher leans down and says, "The story was true. The difference matters. The difference might be the only thing that does." If you stand on the sidewalk outside the old apartment and close your eyes, you can still hear the city at 4 in the morning. The radiator, the bus, the promise that seemed as simple as a floor plan and as complicated as everything that followed it. And you wonder, what files still sit in drawers? What names are still mispronounced by the history books? What rooms still hum at night with plans and hopes and fears? When the door opens next time, will anyone be ready to ask the right questions before the first shout? Some truths arrive loud, and some arrive in pencil lines, easily erased, easily redrawn, but always leaving a ghost of themselves on the page. The investigation into infiltrating the Black Panthers wasn't just a series of memos or a single raid. It was a season in American life when the shadow grew a bureaucracy. This story isn't a relic. It's a mirror. It asks how far a state should go to quiet what it doesn't understand, and how far a community will go to feed what it loves. What do you think happened? Leave your theory in the comments. Someone out there knows the truth.